Rupert Lowe has been kicked out of the Reform Party, and the blowback, frankly, has been absolutely staggering. In fact, if you go on X and you take a look at every post that Nigel Farage makes about Rupert Lowe, just scroll down and look at Rupert Lowe's replies, because I can guarantee you it's got 10 times as many likes. People online, especially on X, clearly love and adore Rupert Lowe, and they're very unhappy to see this situation unfolding. But being loved online, on X and maybe on YouTube, that doesn't necessarily translate into the whole country knowing who you are and loving you. In fact, there's some evidence to suggest that that's simply not the case. A lot of people in the country, outside of the internet, don't really know who Rupert Lowe is. I guess if you're a lifelong Labour voter, why would you? But everyone's going to know who Nigel Farage is, right? He's Mr. Brexit. Anyway, so I thought in this video what I would do is go through, take a look at some of their thoughts, actions, beliefs, ideas, and just compare Nigel Farage and Rupert Lowe, so we can work out whether all of the love, praise and affection that's laid on Rupert Lowe is actually justified. Let's get into it. I'll start with a fan favourite, Tommy Robinson. Now, a lot of people love Tommy Robinson, right? But Nigel Farage is definitely not one of them. We know that he's denounced Tommy in the strongest possible terms repeatedly. In fact, so much so that he was willing to fall out with Elon Musk over this issue, someone who was potentially going to donate $100 million to Nigel's party. Probably not his wisest decision. Anyway, this whole thing spiraled massively out of control to the point where Nigel was willing to go on live TV and make horrendous and false allegations about Tommy Robinson.
Robinson's talked about this, but he has a criminal record, a list as long as your arm, violence against women. I mean, I could go on, Nick.
Now, again, these claims are completely false, and I don't really understand how Nigel managed to get away with making them. I guess if Tommy Robinson wasn't sat in a jail cell in solitary confinement trying not to get his teeth kicked out again or get his food poisoned, he might actually be able to do something about this, like suing Nigel Farage. Anyway, Rupert Lowe's response was rather different. He praised Tommy Robinson for his work on exposing the room-ing gangs. If you know what I'm talking about, you can piece that together yourself. But he just simply said that Tommy Robinson is not right for the Reform Party. And this was exactly the right response to take all along. It's the response that Nigel should have been taking, a man with 30 years in politics, not completely demonising over and over again someone that a lot of your own voters really love. It took Rupert Lowe to have that political savvy and sort of emotional intelligence to make the right response. So here, Rupert Lowe, frankly, is the better man. I don't even know what just happened to the weather, but it's hailing and I need to get the dog somewhere. She doesn't actually seem that bothered, but I'm going to try and get into a wood block. So we managed to get to the wood block, completely soaked, of course. Dog is completely soaked. She's okay. She's drying off. I've given her a towel, sort of. But yeah, as soon as I got here, the skies have cleared. The storm has pretty much passed. I do check the forecasts before I come out, because obviously I don't want to be caught in a storm like that. It's not particularly pleasant. But we are going to finish this video, if it's the last thing I do. For Prince Rupert, we are going to do it. Now, that last segment was meant to lead me neatly into my next one, the roomie gangs. You see, a couple of months ago, as you'll remember, the roomie gangs were all that was in the news cycle. It was dominating everything. And whilst that was the case, whilst people were talking about it, Nigel Farage made a big deal of it. He even made a promise, if the Labour Party did not launch a national inquiry by the end of January, that he and the Reform Party would launch their own private inquiry. Well, that date has come and gone, and there's been no announcements about any kind of private inquiry from the Reform Party. It's just another betrayed promise. I guess Nigel was just trying to win a few extra votes whilst people were talking about it, which is, I think, pretty disgraceful to do on a topic that serious. Anyway, Rupert Lowe, of course, was a member of the party when that promise was made, and he's decided, you know what, I was a part of that promise, and even though I'm now a one-man band, I'm going to keep to it. So Rupert Lowe has decided and declared on X that I will fundraise. He's a wealthy man, but I'm sure he's got a lot of connections. I will fundraise myself for a private inquiry, and I promise you that I will make it happen. So he, as one person, is going to do what Nigel Farage couldn't. Now, this story is actually way worse, right? Because when Reform announced that they were going to do this private inquiry, lots of survivors reached out to the Reform Party saying, hey, we'd love to work with you, share our stories, etc., etc. And they were ignored by all of the Reform MPs. All of them except one, that is. Rupert Lowe. Okay, let's talk about another topic, immigration, possibly the most important topic in the UK right now. And we know what Farage's policy and Reform's policy is. It's net zero migration. So an Englishman, Welshman or Scotsman leaves the country, and then someone from India, Pakistan, Africa, wherever, comes to the country. And I don't think this is a particularly good policy, by the way, because actually all it does is just slow the rate of demographic change. It just slows the rate at which the English people become a minority in England. But anyway, that is their policy. Now, Rupert Lowe has made a lot of comments about immigration that Nigel Farage seemingly does not like. In particular, he's talking about mass deportations of people who are here illegally. So not just people who've come on boats, because that's about 160,000, but people who are overstaying their visas. And this would be over 1 million people, right? So this would be mass deportations. If you deport 1 million people, that is mass deportations. And we know how Nigel feels about mass deportations.
It's a political impossibility to deport hundreds of thousands of people. We simply can't do it. At the moment, it's a political impossibility.
But is it your ambition?
No. I'm not going to get dragged down the route of mass deportations or anything like that.
Now look, if we're talking about deporting the 1 million people who are here in the country illegally, then I'm sorry, but mass deportations is the correct term. And I don't want a leader who's afraid to call a spade, but that's exactly what Nigel seems to be doing. He wrote an article in the Telegraph just yesterday claiming that he told Rupert Lowe he could not use this phrase because it was grave, dark and dangerous. I'm sorry, but I don't want a leader who is afraid of using the appropriate terms in case it really offends people on the left wing. That's not what I want from a leader. So again, sorry, but Rupert Lowe wins. In fact, Nigel Farage has made very clear that the Reform Party is a pro-migration party anyway.
I also talked about the rise of parties with similar views of anti-migration parties across Europe.
So who said I'm an anti-migration party?
Well, you did yourself.
No, I didn't. I said the opposite. I said we're pro-control immigration.
Right,
of course.
It's quite funny, right? Nigel really got his back up there when someone dared to suggest that the Reform Party might be anti-immigration. Anyway, what do you think the head of Reform in Wales is saying about migration?
Well, Wales has had really very limited levels of immigration. And the immigration we have had arguably has been very positive for our economy. So immigration is much less of a factor in politics in Wales than it is, say, in England.
Well, that's a very different tone that I hear.
Well, it looks like the Welsh are going to be getting a bit more immigration under Nigel Farage's leadership. And I just want to say this, right? The idea that it's unpopular to say or to speak about deporting people who are here illegally is nonsense. Everyone can see that. Even the Labour Party right now are producing propaganda videos of them putting people who are here illegally on planes and sending them back to where they belong, like their own countries, right? Even the Labour Party knows that this is immensely popular. They are bragging in Parliament about the fact that they are doing more deportations than the Tories did. Labour are doing that. This is such an open goal for Nigel Farage to take. If this is even popular amongst Labour Party voters, then you know that it's going to be extremely popular for Reform Party voters. And Rupert Lowe seemed to be sensible enough to understand that, right? So why isn't Nigel taking this open goal? I mean, look, Trump ran on this. Trump ran on the premise of 20 million people crossed the border into the United States illegally in the last 5 years. I'm going to deport them back to their own countries. And it was immensely popular. He became president of the United States. Admittedly, he was competing against Kamala Harris, but that's by the by, okay? So it's an open goal that Nigel Farage simply will not take. And I'll tell you why. It's because he's a coward and he's scared of what the left-wing media might say about him, about how mean and nasty he is. Pathetic. I don't want that in a leader. I do not want a coward to be Prime Minister. And so, quite frankly, on immigration, Rupert Lowe completely wins. Hands down, he's the better man. Parliamentary work. Who do you think is putting in the most parliamentary work? Nigel Farage or Rupert Lowe? Well, parliamentarians, MPs, have a tool called written questions, and they can use this to submit questions in writing to the government that the government has to answer. It's a great tool. You can use it to force answers and statistics and data out of the government. It's great. Now, Nigel Farage, to his credit, he has submitted 20 of these in the last 8 months. But how many do you think Rupert Lowe has submitted? He submitted 965. He submitted 48 times as many as Nigel Farage. And yes, you can make the argument that, well, Nigel is the leader of the party, he has other responsibilities, and that is absolutely true. So I wouldn't expect Nigel Farage to be matching Rupert Lowe, but I wouldn't also expect Rupert Lowe to have done 48 times the amount of parliamentary work as Nigel Farage, right? It just doesn't make sense. There's no way that Nigel's extra duties means that he can't do anything in Parliament. That's just madness. That just makes no sense. If you didn't know, Rupert Lowe gave an interview to the Daily Mail in which he said some shocking things about Nigel Farage's leadership, like he needs to surround himself with the right people. But has he? Has Nigel surrounded himself with the right people? Well, let's look at his chairman, the chairman of the Reform Party, Zia Youssef, a man who donated 200 grand and was parachuted into the role. I don't think that's the right way to choose a chairman, but that's by the by. You make your own decisions. Now look, Zia Youssef, he got his money because he started and was the CEO of a company called Velocity Black. But someone went onto the Glassdoor page for Velocity Black, where former employees can leave reviews of the company and what it was like to work there, and just had a look to see what people were saying about the CEO. And it is brutal. The former employees called him obnoxious and rude and horrible, and just said that he was a terrible person to work with. And yet that is the man that Nigel Farage has chosen to make the chairman of the Reform Party. Why? Because he rocked up with a bag full of cash. It's just not clever, right? And you can compare this directly with what happened to Rupert Lowe when some of these allegations were made against him. Allegations I obviously don't believe. I really don't believe them at all. But Rupert Lowe's staff, they put out a signed letter with all of their names on saying, actually, no, Rupert Lowe has never bullied any of us and he's a fantastic boss. And we'll talk to anyone, we'll talk to any investigation, and we'll talk to any media outlet because we will defend Rupert Lowe because he's a great guy. Who is jumping to Nigel Farage's defence like that? Absolutely nobody. And it just goes to show you that Rupert is such a good bloke that his staff show him that kind of loyalty. Look, I could go on. I could tell you all about how Rupert Lowe donates his entire salary from being an MP to charities in his constituency every single month. He hasn't made a single penny out of being an MP. I can tell you about the time the BBC went to his constituency trying to find people to criticise Rupert Lowe because he's in the Reform Party, and they couldn't find a single person who had a bad word to say about him. The reality is, he's just a good bloke. It's that simple. And so do I believe the allegations against him that Nigel and Zia Youssef are making? No, I categorically do not. If I'm wrong, if it turns out I'm wrong for whatever reason, then I will correct the record and I'll apologise. But right now, I simply do not believe it. And the reality is this. It isn't the first time Nigel has done this. He has killed people's political careers numerous times in the past. Look at this clip.
In Kilroy Silk, if you go back to the days of 2004, Kilroy Silk, very famous Labour MP who was challenging Nigel for the leadership. At that time, they said that he was a threat to the party. Kilroy Silk had said that the party was unskilled, wasn't democratic enough, didn't have the organisation, words that seemingly are the same that Rupert Lowe said. What happened then is Kilroy Silk was undermined, and suddenly the chairman came out and said that we need to get rid of Kilroy Silk because he was no longer a member of the party that could be trusted. We couldn't work with him. Kilroy Silk, gone. David Campbell Bannerman, also an MEP at the time, wanted to become leader of UKIP at the time. Same sort of allegations. David Campbell Bannerman defected to the Conservative Party. Douglas Carswell, big name that came in along from the Conservative Party. He did not give the money that Nigel Farage wanted out of the benefits of being an MP.
He defected from
the
Conservative Party, yeah.
Yeah, and along that, he had some very, very good and talented people like Patrick O'Flynn, Susan Evans, an immensely articulate woman, all rising the stars coming up suddenly. They too were undermining Nigel, not part of the party. And the same stick was used by political people. In that time, it was the leader of people who were in charge of the party, the chairman, Stephen Crowther, that led sorts of investigations into Carswell, investigations that these people, now you're seeing it with Ben Habib, now Rupert Lowe, and I faced it myself. So this is a standard methodology. Someone rises, someone looks as though they're as good as Nigel, better than Nigel in some ways, the membership love him, then they're no longer a part of the party. They're a threat. They create division. We can't have division in our party, otherwise we'll lose the next election.
So why exactly does Nigel do this? Well, I'll tell you, and the answer's very simple. He's a narcissist. He wants to be the guy. He wants to be the hero of the people, but he's just not. And that's why when Rupert Lowe starts gaining a lot of popularity, he throws him under the bus. It's why he can't accept Tommy Robinson, because more people love Tommy Robinson than love Nigel Farage, and he hates it. He absolutely hates it. But look, this isn't some harmless thing. This isn't just some guy who's trying to protect his control of the party. It's really damaging to the party, because now you've lost one of your most popular MPs, and actually other people who could have put themselves forward to be an MP or a councillor for the Reform Party are no longer going to want to, because they know that if they get too popular, if they do too well at their job, or they say the wrong thing about Nigel Farage, he will throw them under the bus. He might even make up some allegations and report you to the police. Nobody wants to be in a political party that is that toxic. So yes, it's very serious and it's very damaging to the Reform Party. Now, there is some small slither of hope that something good could come out of this situation, because the Telegraph is reporting that if Rupert Lowe were to start his own party, then Elon Musk would be open to funding it. And actually, Rupert Lowe is so popular and so consistent and so honest and has such integrity that a lot of people would rally to his banner. A lot of people, I think, would be willing to support that party at its outset. And if it's got Elon Musk money, then yeah, you could get something really good out of that. And look, I hope it happens, because I trust Rupert Lowe in a way that I simply do not trust Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage reminds me of Boris Johnson. He sticks his finger in the air, sees which way the wind is blowing on a given day, which today, by the way, is just every direction, although at the moment it's fine. And then he decides, oh, the wind is blowing this way today, so I'm going to say these things so that I look popular and I can talk comfortably about things on the mainstream media channels. I just don't want that in a leader. I want someone who has courage of their convictions and that won't just flip-flop all over the place. And that is what I think Rupert Lowe potentially has to offer. Let me know what you think. I don't want to go on rambling too long. I actually want to get home and dry my feet. Today's video was a bit weird. I wasn't really expecting to get caught in that storm. It was very, very strange. The dog's okay, she's happy. The sun is out now, the wind is kind of abated. Like I said, I'll say it again because I know people are going to judge me, but I did check the weather forecast, and you know, if that had been on the weather forecast, I obviously would have waited until now. I mean, look at it. The sun's out, blue skies-ish. Anyway, till the next one.